They say a father would give up everything for his daughter, but nobody in St. Haven knew that before sunrise, one man was about to make the entire city remember it. Drip, drip, drip. A small line of red from an overturned cup of cranberry juice slid across the polished hospital floor, moving slowly beneath the harsh white lights of St. Haven Medical Center. Nurses rushed past in blue scrubs. Wheels rolled over tile. Somewhere nearby, a monitor suddenly changed rhythm. Beep, 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 beep. Emily Carter could barely hear any of it anymore. The world around her had become strangely distant, like someone had lowered the volume on reality itself. 3 minutes earlier, she had been smiling. 3 minutes earlier, she had been sitting upright in bed on the 7th-floor maternity wing with a soft gray blanket over her legs and a small notebook resting against her 8-month pregnant belly. Written across the top page in neat blue ink were 2 names she couldn't stop staring at: Ethan Carter and Noah Carter. She smiled every time she looked at them. Twins. 2 little boys. Daniel always loved the name Ethan. She had written it twice before finally circling it with a tiny heart. Outside the window, early morning sunlight stretched across downtown St. Haven, turning the glass skyscrapers gold. Cars crawled through morning traffic 20 stories below. Everything looked normal, safe, peaceful. Emily rested her hand over her stomach and felt movement beneath her fingertips. Easy there, she whispered with a small laugh. Daddy's probably still asleep after another late night at work. Daniel had left around midnight after promising he'd be back before breakfast. Another emergency meeting. Another investor dinner. Another apology with tired eyes and a kiss against her forehead. Emily wanted to believe him. She really did. But something had felt different lately. Text messages hidden behind locked screens. Late calls taken outside. Smiles that disappeared too quickly whenever she walked into a room. Her fingers tightened around the notebook. Then came the sound. Click, click, click. High heels against hospital tile. Slow, controlled, deliberate. Emily looked toward the doorway. At first, she only saw long blonde hair and a designer coat folded over one arm. Then came the smile. Calm, polite, wrong. Sophia Reed stepped into the room like she belonged there. Like she had walked through that door 100 times before. Emily stared, confused for only a moment. She had seen Sophia once at Daniel's company holiday gala 6 months earlier. Daniel's executive assistant. Smart, elegant, beautiful. Sophia smiled wider as she closed the door behind her. Emily, she said softly, almost warmly. You look even better than Daniel said you would. Emily felt something cold move through her chest. Not fear. Not yet. Something quieter. Something heavier. Then Sophia slowly sat down beside the hospital bed and crossed her legs. The perfume in the room suddenly felt too strong. Too expensive. Too familiar. And Emily suddenly realized exactly where she had smelled it before. Sophia tilted her head slightly and kept smiling, but Emily suddenly understood why the scent felt so familiar. Sandalwood and jasmine. Daniel's car had smelled like that 3 weeks ago after he picked her up from a prenatal appointment. At the time, he had laughed and blamed a rideshare client. 2 weeks ago, the same scent had lingered on one of his jackets hanging in their closet. Emily remembered standing there in silence with the hanger still in her hand while Daniel kissed the top of her head and told her she was imagining things because pregnancy made people sensitive to smells. Now that same perfume sat only inches away from her hospital bed. Sophia folded her hands across her lap and looked around the room with calm curiosity. Her eyes moved over the flowers near the window, over the tiny blue baby socks hanging beside a stuffed elephant, and finally toward the notebook still resting on Emily's stomach. Ethan and Noah, Sophia said softly. Those are sweet names. Emily immediately closed the notebook. Something deep inside her tightened. Why are you here? She asked quietly. Sophia looked almost surprised by the question. Daniel did not tell you? Emily stared at her. Sophia let out a small breath and shook her head slowly as if disappointed by something she already expected. Of course he did not. The room suddenly felt smaller. The air felt warmer. Somewhere outside, a cart rolled past in the hallway. A nurse laughed in the distance. Life continued moving normally while Emily sat completely still. Sophia leaned back in her chair. Emily, I did not come here to hurt you. I actually asked Daniel if I should stay away from this conversation. Emily blinked. Conversation? Sophia looked down briefly before meeting Emily's eyes again. I told him honesty matters. Especially now. Emily felt one of the babies move beneath her hand. The tiny kick should have comforted her. Instead, it made her chest feel tight. I do not understand what you are talking about. Sophia studied her face for several seconds. Then she slowly reached into her purse. Emily immediately felt her heartbeat quicken. Sophia pulled out her phone and turned it over in her hand. You know, she said quietly. For months, I almost felt guilty. Emily stared without speaking. You seem kind. You seem like a good person. Sophia smiled sadly. But then I realized something. She looked toward the window. People stay in situations because they are comfortable, not because they are happy. Emily swallowed hard. What does that mean? Sophia looked directly at her. Daniel has not been happy for a very long time. Silence. Absolute silence. Emily felt like the entire room had suddenly emptied itself of oxygen. She stared at Sophia, waiting for a laugh, waiting for someone to step out and explain some misunderstanding, waiting for Daniel to walk through the door and tell her this was insane. Instead, Sophia unlocked her phone. Tap, tap, tap. Then she turned the screen around and placed it carefully on the blanket beside Emily's hand. Emily looked down. Her entire body went cold. It was Daniel, smiling, wearing the gray suit Emily bought him for his birthday 4 months ago. His arm rested around Sophia's shoulder. They were standing beside a beach somewhere she had never seen. The date sat in the corner of the photo. 4 weeks earlier. 4 weeks ago, Daniel told Emily he had been in Chicago for business meetings. Sophia spoke softly. I think you deserve the truth before everybody else starts deciding your future for you. Emily could barely hear her anymore because one thought suddenly crashed into her mind harder than anything else. Daniel was supposed to be on his way back to the hospital. Emily kept staring at the photograph as if looking at it long enough would somehow change it. Maybe the date would disappear. Maybe Daniel's smile would vanish. Maybe the woman standing beside him would become someone else. But nothing changed. The image remained exactly where it was, cold and impossible beneath the bright hospital lights. Her fingers felt numb around the edges of the blanket. 4 weeks ago, Daniel had kissed her goodbye at 6 in the morning and promised he would only be gone for 2 days. 4 weeks ago, he had called her from what he claimed was downtown Chicago and complained about hotel coffee and airport delays. 4 weeks ago, Emily had sat alone in the nursery at home, folding tiny baby clothes while talking to him on speakerphone. She remembered laughing because one of the twins had kicked so hard she almost dropped a pair of blue socks. She remembered Daniel laughing too. Emily looked up slowly. No. The word came out weak and small. Sophia tilted her head. No. Emily shook her head harder this time. No. There has to be some explanation. Sophia looked almost sympathetic. Almost. That is exactly what I told myself when this started. Emily blinked. What do you mean? Sophia looked toward the window for a moment before answering. I did not know about you at first. Emily stared at her. Daniel told me he was separated. Emily felt her heartbeat suddenly pounding inside her ears. Beep, beep, beep. The monitor beside her bed picked up the rhythm immediately. Sophia glanced at it before continuing. Months later, I found out he was still married. Then I found out about the pregnancy. Emily looked down at her stomach. The twins shifted beneath her hand again. She wanted Daniel to walk through the door right now. She wanted him to tell her Sophia was lying. She wanted him to explain everything with one sentence and make this nightmare disappear. But another voice inside her whispered something she did not want to hear. The late nights. The hidden screens. The distance in his eyes. The business trips. The missing warmth in his voice lately. Tiny pieces suddenly started connecting together like shattered glass finding its original shape. Sophia leaned forward carefully. Emily, I am not saying this because I enjoy it. Emily laughed suddenly. One short broken sound. Really? Sophia said nothing. Silence settled between them. Outside in the hallway, someone pushed a supply cart past the room. A television played softly somewhere nearby. Life continued as if nothing had changed. Emily looked toward the flowers by the window. White roses. Daniel had sent them yesterday with a card that read, "Rest, and let me spoil you when you come home. Love you always. Love you always." Emily felt tears gathering but refused to let them fall. Then Sophia spoke again, very quietly. There is something else. Emily closed her eyes. Of course there was. There was always something else. Sophia reached into her purse again and pulled out a small velvet box. Emily felt her stomach drop before Sophia even opened it, because she already knew that box. She knew the deep navy color. She knew the silver ribbon tied around it. 3 Christmases ago, Emily had wrapped that exact box herself before placing it beneath the tree. Emily stared at the velvet box as Sophia placed it gently onto the blanket between them. The room suddenly felt colder. Not physically, emotionally, like someone had opened a door somewhere and let winter walk in. Emily recognized every detail of that box because she had spent nearly 2 weeks searching for it before Christmas 3 years earlier. She remembered standing in a jewelry store while snow fell outside, holding different watches beneath bright display lights because Daniel had always complained he was late to everything. She remembered laughing with the saleswoman and saying, "My husband is impossible to shop for." She remembered feeling proud when she finally found the perfect one. Sophia slowly opened the lid. Inside sat a silver watch with a dark blue face. Emily felt her chest tighten instantly. Her eyes dropped to the tiny engraving on the back visible beneath the glass lid. "Forever, no matter where life takes us. Love, Emily." For a moment the room disappeared. The walls disappeared. The machines disappeared. Emily felt like she was standing back in her living room 3 Christmases ago, watching Daniel unwrap the gift while smiling at her with warm eyes. He had stood up and kissed her forehead. He had said he would never take it off. Emily swallowed hard. "No." She barely heard herself speak. Sophia looked at her quietly. "No," Emily repeated. "No, no, no." She shook her head and stared at the watch again as if reality itself had become damaged. "He said he lost it 6 months ago." Sophia looked down at the box and slowly closed it again. "I asked where it came from." Emily lifted her eyes toward her. Sophia's expression softened slightly. "He told me he bought it years ago and never wore it." Emily suddenly laughed again. Not because anything was funny, because her mind simply could not decide what else to do. It came out small and shaky and wrong. Her eyes moved toward the flowers by the window again. "Love you always." The words from the card echoed inside her head. "Love you always." The monitor beside her bed picked up her rising heartbeat. Beep, 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 beep. Sophia noticed immediately. "Emily." Emily looked at her. "How long?" Sophia hesitated. That hesitation lasted maybe 2 seconds. 2 seconds too long. Emily already knew before the answer came. 8 months. Silence. Absolute silence. Emily stared at her face without blinking. 8 months. 8 months ago was not some random point in time. 8 months ago was the night Emily and Daniel had sat on their back porch eating takeout and talking about becoming parents. 8 months ago, Daniel had cried after seeing the positive pregnancy test. 8 months ago, he had held her face and whispered that their lives were about to change forever. Emily slowly placed her hand over her stomach again. The twins moved beneath her fingertips. She looked down and felt tears finally gather in her eyes. Then her phone suddenly vibrated on the tray beside her bed. Once. Twice. Sophia looked at it. Emily looked at it. Daniel Carter calling. Daniel Carter calling. The screen glowed between them like something alive. Emily stared at his name while her heartbeat pounded inside her ears. Once upon a time, seeing his name appear had made her smile automatically. It used to mean comfort, home, safety. Now it felt like staring at a stranger wearing her husband's face. The phone continued vibrating against the tray beside her bed. Sophia looked down at it and then back toward Emily. For the first time since entering the room, even Sophia seemed uncertain. "You should answer," she said quietly. Emily looked at her without moving. "Why?" Sophia crossed her arms slowly. "Because if you do not, he is going to come upstairs wondering what happened." Emily looked back toward the screen. Daniel Carter calling. 3 words. 3 ordinary words that suddenly carried the weight of an entire life collapsing. The call ended. Silence returned for barely 2 seconds before the phone lit up again. Daniel Carter calling. Emily remembered all the little things now. Things she had ignored because love had a way of turning warning signs into excuses. The business dinners that became overnight trips. The delayed responses. The way Daniel had started placing his phone face down on tables. The way he smiled at messages without realizing she was watching. Tiny moments. Tiny cracks. Tiny lies. Sophia stood up from the chair and walked slowly toward the window. "He does care about you, Emily." Emily looked up immediately. "Do not." Sophia turned around. "What?" Emily shook her head. "Do not stand there and tell me that." Her voice was still soft, but something inside it had changed. Sophia watched her carefully. Emily felt it too. The sadness was still there. The confusion was still there, but underneath it something else had appeared. Something harder. Something steadier. Sophia lowered her eyes briefly. "I am just telling you what he told me." Emily laughed again, except this time it sounded different. Not broken. Sharp. "What exactly did he tell you?" Sophia hesitated. Emily noticed immediately. Another hesitation. Another tiny pause. "Sophia." Sophia looked at her. "He said." She stopped. The monitor beside Emily's bed continued its quiet rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Outside, a child laughed somewhere down the hallway. A television announced morning traffic reports. Somewhere in the city, people were drinking coffee and heading to work, while Emily felt like the ground beneath her entire life had disappeared. Sophia finally exhaled. "He said you had become distant after the pregnancy." Emily stared at her. "He said you stopped seeing him as a husband and started seeing him only as the father of your children." Emily said nothing. "He said you barely looked at him anymore." Silence. Sophia looked uncomfortable now. "He said he felt alone." Emily slowly turned her head toward the flowers near the window again. "White roses. Love you always." She remembered something suddenly. 3 months earlier, Daniel had come home exhausted after work and sat quietly beside her on the couch. Emily had rubbed his shoulders for almost 20 minutes because he looked tired. He had fallen asleep leaning against her. She had covered him with a blanket and kissed his forehead before turning off the lights. Emily looked back at Sophia and spoke so quietly it barely sounded like her own voice. "That is strange." Sophia blinked. "What is?" Emily stared directly into her eyes. "Because I was there the whole time." For several seconds, Sophia did not say anything. She simply stared at Emily as if trying to decide whether to defend Daniel or defend herself. The silence stretched across the room and became heavy. Emily could hear every sound now. The steady hum of the air conditioner above her. The distant ringing of a telephone at the nurse's station. Footsteps moving past the hallway outside. Tiny, ordinary sounds that suddenly felt enormous. Sophia looked away first. "I am not trying to make you the villain here," she said quietly. Emily lowered her eyes toward the blanket over her legs. Her hand still rested over her stomach. The twins had become strangely still. Not completely still, but quieter than usual. The thought immediately sent a small wave of worry through her chest. She shifted slightly and waited. A few seconds later, she felt a soft movement beneath her palm and released a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Sophia noticed. "Are you okay?" Emily nodded automatically, even though she was not sure anymore what okay even meant. The phone beside her lit up again. Daniel Carter calling. 3 times. 4 times. 5 times now. Emily stared at it. She imagined him downstairs somewhere, walking quickly through the lobby with coffee in his hand. She imagined him smiling before opening the door. She imagined him stepping inside, expecting to see the same Emily who had kissed him goodbye the night before. The Emily who trusted him without question. But that woman felt far away now. Sophia sat back down slowly. "You should probably answer him before he comes looking for me." Emily looked up immediately. "Looking for you?" Sophia realized what she had said, and her face changed slightly. Just slightly. But Emily saw it. Tiny shifts had become impossible to ignore now. Tiny pauses. Tiny expressions. Tiny truths slipping through cracks. Emily stared at her. "You were not supposed to be here." Sophia looked away. Emily sat very still. Suddenly, another memory appeared in her mind. Last month, Daniel had received a call while they were having dinner at home. He had looked at the screen and immediately stood up from the table. Emily remembered asking who it was. Daniel had smiled too quickly and said it was an accountant from work. She remembered hearing his voice through the kitchen doorway. Softer than usual. Careful. Familiar. Emily slowly looked at Sophia. "You knew I would be here today." Sophia said nothing. Emily felt something inside her settle. Not break. Settle. Like the final missing puzzle piece quietly sliding into place. The monitor beside her continued its soft rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Then suddenly the room door opened. Both women looked up at the same time, expecting Daniel. But it was not Daniel. A young nurse stepped inside, holding a clipboard against her chest. She smiled politely at first before glancing between the two women. Then her expression changed slightly. "Mrs. Carter?" Emily looked toward her. The nurse shifted nervously. "There is a man downstairs asking for you." Emily frowned. "A man?" The nurse nodded slowly. "He says his name is William Harrison." Sophia's face lost all color. Emily looked from the nurse to Sophia and then back again, because for a second her brain refused to process what she had just heard. William Harrison. The name felt familiar in the strange way that names of powerful people always did. You saw them on magazine covers in airport bookstores. You heard them mentioned during business interviews and financial news reports. Harrison Global. Real estate. Technology. Hotels. Billions of dollars. Emily blinked slowly. I think there is some mistake, she said quietly. The nurse looked down at her clipboard. He specifically asked for Emily Carter. Sophia stood so quickly that the chair legs scraped against the floor. The sound cut through the room like glass. Emily turned toward her immediately. Sophia had gone completely still, completely pale. Emily stared at her face. You know him? Sophia looked at her, but did not answer. Emily narrowed her eyes. Sophia. For the first time since entering the room, confidence disappeared from Sophia's expression. There was no polished smile now, no composure, no carefully chosen words. Just silence. The nurse looked between both women awkwardly. Should I send him up? Emily looked back toward her. I do not understand. Why would William Harrison be here? The nurse shifted nervously. He said he has been trying to reach you for several hours. Emily felt her stomach twist. Trying to reach her? That made no sense. She had never met William Harrison. She was absolutely sure of it. Then another thought suddenly entered her mind. Daniel. Maybe Daniel knew him somehow. Daniel's company had grown rapidly over the last few years. Investors, partnerships, corporate events. Maybe there was a business connection. Maybe Daniel had arranged something. Maybe this entire morning had become so surreal that her brain was grabbing onto anything that sounded reasonable. But then she looked back at Sophia again. Sophia still had not moved, still had not spoken. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. How do you know him? Sophia swallowed once. Outside the room, someone rolled a cart down the hallway. A machine beeped somewhere in the distance. Morning sunlight continued spilling through the window as if the world itself had decided not to care what was happening inside room 714. Sophia finally sat back down very slowly. Daniel never told you? Emily stared at her. Told me what? Sophia looked down at her hands. I thought. She stopped. Emily's chest tightened instantly. Thought what? Sophia lifted her eyes, and for the first time there was no edge in them. No competition. No coldness. Just confusion. Real confusion. I thought you knew. Emily felt her fingers tighten around the blanket. Knew what? Sophia opened her mouth, but before any words came out, another sound interrupted the room. Footsteps. Several pairs. Slow. Steady. Deliberate. Not hurried hospital footsteps. Not nurses. Not doctors. Something else. The nurse turned toward the doorway first. Emily followed her eyes. Then she saw shadows moving beneath the glass panel beside the door. One figure. Then another. Then another. Sophia looked toward the entrance, and the remaining color disappeared from her face completely. Then the door handle slowly turned. The door opened slowly, and for a moment nobody inside the room spoke. Emily expected doctors. She expected Daniel rushing upstairs with panic in his eyes. Instead, she saw 3 men in dark suits step aside near the doorway with quiet precision. Then an older man entered behind them. He moved calmly. No hurry. No dramatic expression. Just quiet certainty. William Harrison looked nothing like Emily expected. News articles always showed him standing beside skyscrapers or smiling beside politicians and celebrities. The man standing inside room 714 looked tired. Not weak. Just tired. His silver hair was neatly combed back. His navy overcoat hung open over a charcoal suit. His eyes moved across the room once and stopped immediately on Emily. Everything else disappeared from his face. Emily stared at him. She had seen those eyes before. Not on television. Not in magazines. Somewhere else. Somewhere much closer. William took one slow step forward. Then another. Sophia stood up so quickly that she nearly knocked the chair backward. Mr. Harrison, she said quietly. William never looked at her. Not even once. Emily felt her heartbeat begin climbing again. Beep. Beep. Beep beep. The monitor reacted instantly. William's eyes moved briefly toward the machine and then back to Emily. Something changed in his expression. Emily could not explain it. It looked almost like pain. Real pain. The nurse shifted awkwardly near the doorway. Sir, I can give you a few minutes if. William gently raised his hand without looking away from Emily. The nurse nodded immediately and stepped outside, quietly closing the door behind her. Silence settled over the room again. Emily looked from William towards Sophia and back. Sophia looked terrified now. Not nervous. Terrified. William finally spoke. His voice was lower than Emily expected. Calm. Controlled. Emily. She stared at him. Nobody had ever said her name like that before. It sounded careful, like he was handling something fragile. Emily swallowed slowly. I think there is some mistake. William did not answer immediately. He reached inside his coat pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. Not a phone. Not papers. A wallet. Emily frowned slightly. William opened it and removed a small photograph. His hand shook just enough for Emily to notice. Then he walked closer and placed it gently beside her notebook. Emily looked down. The air left her lungs. It was an old photograph. At least 25 years old. A young woman sat on a park bench, smiling beneath summer sunlight. Long blonde hair. Bright eyes. Emily knew that face instantly because she had spent her entire childhood looking at it in frames around the house. Her mother. Emily stared without blinking. Beside her mother sat a younger William Harrison with his arm around her shoulders. Both of them were laughing at something outside the frame. Emily slowly looked up. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Sophia covered her mouth with her hand. William looked directly into Emily's eyes. Very quietly, he said, I have spent 28 years trying to find my daughter. Emily felt like the room had disappeared around her. The machines were still there. The sunlight was still falling across the floor. The monitor still repeated its steady rhythm. But none of it felt real anymore. 28 years. 28 years trying to find her. Emily looked down at the photograph again. Her mother looked so young. So happy. She had never seen that picture before in her life. Her mother had always avoided talking about the years before Emily was born. Whenever Emily asked about old relationships or family history, she would simply smile and say that some stories took time. Emily had stopped asking years ago. Her eyes slowly lifted toward William. He had not moved. Not even an inch. There were tears in his eyes now, but he made no attempt to hide them. Your mother disappeared before I knew she was pregnant, he said quietly. I searched for years. Private investigators. Records. Anything I could find. Emily stared at him. After she passed away last year, I found letters. His voice almost broke for a second before recovering. Letters she never sent. Silence. Sophia stood near the window, completely frozen. Emily almost forgot she was still there. William finally looked toward her for the first time. Just one look. Nothing more. But Sophia lowered her eyes immediately. Emily noticed. She noticed everything now. William turned back toward her. I was trying to reach you this morning because there were things I needed to tell you. He glanced briefly toward the phone still sitting beside her bed. Daniel had called 8 times now. 9. 10. But then I received another call. Emily frowned slightly. William reached inside his coat and pulled out a phone. He tapped the screen once and held it out toward her. Emily looked down. Security footage. Hospital hallway footage. Timestamp. 8:14 a.m. Emily watched Sophia walking through the maternity floor. Then another camera angle appeared. Elevator footage. Sophia stepping out while speaking on her phone. Audio had been attached. Emily looked toward William, confused. He spoke calmly. One thing you should know about Harrison Global. His expression never changed. We own St. Haven Medical Center. Emily's eyes widened slightly. William continued. I did not come here angry. He looked at her softly. I came here because I found my daughter. Then he looked at Sophia again. But I do not ignore people who create pain around my family. Sophia's face had gone completely white. Mr. Harrison, William raised his hand gently. Not harshly. Not angrily. Just enough to stop her. The hospital recordings, visitor logs, messages, and company records are already being reviewed. He said it quietly, almost kindly. Somehow that felt more frightening than shouting ever could. Then suddenly the room door opened again. Daniel stepped inside, breathing heavily, coffee still in his hand. He stopped after 2 steps. His eyes moved toward Sophia, then toward William, then toward Emily. The smile on his face disappeared instantly. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Emily looked at Daniel, and for the first time all morning, she felt completely calm. Because some men lose everything in one loud moment. Others lose it in complete silence.